So here you got a 10, what PwC considers as economic tea leaves for Nigeria to read and digest for the current economic year. The federal government is looking at 3.5% GDP growth for the year. PwC team thinks, well, we will grow, but perhaps not as much as 3.5%. So what are the variables from the macroeconomic point of view that will drive the current fiscal year? The advisory partner and chief economist at PwC Nigeria, Andrew Nevin, is here with us, and we're taking his first word here on Business Morning and on Channels for 2018. Andrew, it's good to have you.
Great pleasure to be here, both.
Give us a first word for the economy in 2018, in summary.
Well, I think what we're saying is that we think it'll grow 2 to 2.5%, but it could grow faster if we stay on top of the economic reforms. The danger for us is because the election's coming up, all of this momentum around the structural things we need, we're going to lose a little bit of it. So we could get to 4%, but we probably won't get there.
Let's review these 10 pillars, as it were, what you will call the 10 cornerstones of the economy in 2018. And the first way to start is that oil. Crude oil is still a growth lever for Nigeria if you want to grow. So Nigeria still needs oil to grow. Why is this important, and what do you think the appropriate pricing for Nigeria would be to live through 2018?
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. We haven't got over being dependent on oil. It's still 93% of our exports, still a big chunk of the government revenue. So this period where oil is 55 to 65, it's probably a pretty good place for us because it's high enough, it gives us some room to diversify, but it's not so low that we go through the pain we went through a couple of years ago. In terms of the oil markets, I mean, I think that we could see that it could stay in this band all year, 55 to 65. There's things that keep it from going above, the shale oil in the United States. There's other issues that are keeping it from going too low, particularly some instability around Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and also Libya. So I think cautiously we can stay in this range. But again, we need to keep on the diversification drive because one day we're not going to use oil. So we need to be prepared for that now. So let's take advantage of the better oil prices to give us a little breathing room to do that, but don't take the eye off the diversification ball.
If you take a look at the second page that is coming up about how economic growth gets a boost from our oil prices, and you folks, your team did a very decent job of putting this on our TV screen there. Explain these numbers to us, how we've come through this V-curve as far as contribution of oil to GDP growth is concerned.
Well, we've seen over the last 4 years oil drop down as low as $28, I think in 2015, and then a lot of times in the 40s. I mean, what this curve illustrates is us going from the good times in 2014 is oil crashed below $100 down to 28. And we thought we were diversifying, but as I said earlier, it's still not the case. We're still highly dependent on it. So in 2016, we hit the low point, as people can see in the bottom chart, and of course this is all available online. And we've got a little bit of a boost back to growth, again driven by oil. But it just highlights how far we have to go to get the other sectors to be moving, so we're no longer dependent on this way.
Nigeria needs oil, but the key question is, at what price do you think Nigeria would have crude oil price revenue that would enable its diversification program at the pace at which everyone wants Nigeria to move? We're moving, but folks says we should move, and we can move really faster on reforms. What price do you think will keep us on that momentum?
We like the $60 price. As I said, it's high enough that we're not in a world of pain, but it's low enough it reminds people we have to diversify. $100, all that happened at $100 was we wasted or diverted the excess. $28, if you remember, civil servants were not getting paid, massive problems at both the state and the federal government level in terms of fiscal situation. So $60 is like a Goldilocks price for us, low enough to keep us focused, but high enough not to be in the worst world.
Okay, we're not hungry, but not overfed.
Not overfed.
Not to forget where we're coming from. But again, oil price is good, a little bit decent, but again, we have a few other macro variables here that keep eating the GDP and our growth like termites, if you ask me. So inflation on one hand, we're still unable to lower our policy interest rate headline figure, and then we have the FX, a little bit of a stability, and folks says we can tinker a little bit more with our FX exchange rate. We can tinker with our interest rate to grow the economy, but we're scared of inflation.
Well, I mean, inflation has come down a little bit, but it hasn't got down to the single digits, the high single digits where we need it to be. I mean, for an emerging economy like us, economists would say 7 to 9% is actually the right inflation rate, and that would allow interest rates to come down a little bit, but we're still in double-digit inflation. It's come off a little bit. Food inflation hit a high of 20, it's come down, I think, 14% for food inflation. I mean, but to keep inflation going down, we need to make sure production is going up, particularly on the food side. The more food we produce, we keep the prices lower in the markets, we'll get inflation down on that. But we need that inflation down to get the headroom to lower our interest rates.
What I found very interesting, and in the next slide we're bringing up, has to do with the policy rate. And your team is suggesting, looking at 100 basis point increase in NPR, then a 150 increase. Then we moved on. Then we have 200 increase. We have 200 haircut. Looks like we're back to a zero-sum game.
Well, I think that in our thinking in this scenario, we could see interest rates coming down in the next few months if the CBN takes advantage of the drop of inflation, 200 basis points, as you said. But as we get closer to the election, history has shown that we're going to have to raise interest rates. So we could very well see this sort of drop 200 basis points and then sort of give it back as we run into it. But part of the issue with interest rates, as you're aware, is because the Senate is no longer confirming presidential appointments. We're a little bit stuck because the Monetary Policy Committee actually doesn't have a quorum to make a change. So they held, well, there wasn't an official meeting last time. We're still at 14%. So it's not clear from a regulatory viewpoint how the CBN would actually change the rate at this stage because we have no quorum.
So what we're looking at on the screen as your postulations at PwC is a scenario that's a projection, but we don't even have an MPC, a quorum to do a meeting. Right. So this scenario may as well play out or not play out as we drag on to the end of the first quarter, and there's no definitive statement yet as to when the monetary policy will meet to consider a few things.
Right. So then, of course, the MPC rate would stay at 14%, and if according to our scenario, it would then stay at 14% right to the election because we won't get that dip before we have to rise it again.
So until we get the MPC to meet, we're beating a tight corner right now.